Hello, this is a 2020-2022 financial aid high school presentation that is being recorded on behalf of the Freehold Regional High School District. My name is Will Kisane. I am Executive Director of Financial Aid at the College of New Jersey. This presentation is geared towards current high school seniors who will be applying for financial aid for the 2020-2021 academic year. There is a lot of information that will be covered in this presentation. The presentation has also been sent to the guidance office, so if you require a copy of it, please feel free to reach out to them, and I'm sure they can give you a copy of the presentation. I have been in financial aid since 1989, the last 10 years here at the College of New Jersey. So with that, we will get started. What are we going to cover tonight? We are going to cover the types and sources of aid, the application process, the financial aid package, and then other information that will be used for you during your application process. But before we start, every college and university in the United States is required to have what is called a net price calculator. A net price calculator basically is a mini financial aid application. It could take anywhere between 5, 10, 15 minutes to fill out. It's usually located either in the college's financial aid webpage or admissions webpage. And what it does is it allows you to put in some key information about your household and gives you an estimate of what all first-time incoming freshmen are receiving, kind of like an average financial aid package at that school. So my recommendation to families is usually when you have your college search narrowed down to, let's say, 3, 4, maybe even your top 5, go out to the institution's financial aid website or admissions website, find their net price calculator, and spend time completing it. That way it will give you an idea of whether the institution is very generous with their financial aid or whether they're a little miserly with their aid, and perhaps that can shape the conversation as to whether that is a good fit for you and economically a good fit for your family. This slide I consider this slide one of the most important slides of the presentation, and it's because when you apply for financial aid, your financial aid information will be sent to the sources of aid that you see on the left-hand side. So for example, the financial aid forms will be sent to the federal government for processing, will be sent to the state of New Jersey for processing, and it will be sent to every college or university that you indicate on that financial aid application. What those entities are going to be doing is they're going to be evaluating you for the types of financial aid that you see on the right-hand side. So they're all going to be evaluating you for grants, scholarships, loans through their student loan programs, and employment opportunities through the federal work-study program. Now you notice I left one out, and it's outside organizations. Now, when you were applying for, let's say, private scholarships through outside organizations, those entities are not going to automatically receive your financial aid information, but they may ask for it during the application process. That will require an extra step on your part. When you apply for financial aid, the results of your application are going to be sent to the email address used by the student when they completed their free application for federal student aid. Again, those results are going to be sent to the email address used when you apply for financial aid. So some of those outside organizations may require that you send them those results in order to help evaluate your private scholarship application. So again, to reiterate, the financial aid information will be automatically sent to all the sources that you see on the left, and each of those sources will evaluate you for the types of financial aid that you see on the right-hand side. Now, some types of federal aid. So the first one I'm going to go over is these are all need-based grants provided by the federal government. Again, you're going to be evaluated automatically, so you don't have to do anything special or separate for each one of these. Federal government signature program is called the Pell Grant. The maximum award for this current year, the current 2020-2021 academic year, is $6,345. Awards go down as low as, I believe, $563, and these are yearly amounts, okay? The second program there, FSEOG, stands for Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and that is aid that the federal government gives to each institution, and then as each institution receives your financial aid data, they will evaluate you for eligibility to see if you qualify for that type of grant. Another grant that the federal government, I don't want to say pushes, but provides a lot, and it's very important to them, is the TEACH grant. If you're considering having a career in teaching and are willing to make a commitment to teach for a certain number of years after you graduate, then the TEACH grant may be available for you. Again, these are need-based grants, so when we go over the application, you'll see that certain things like income, household size, assets are going to be considered in evaluating eligibility for these grants, but these are some of the grants that are available through the federal government. The state of New Jersey is very generous with their state aid grant programs, and they also have a lot of them, okay? So what you have here is kind of an example of the different programs that are available through the state of New Jersey. You'll see their signature program here is called the Full-Time TAG Program. That stands for Tuition Aid Grant. And although this is an old sheet, you'll see that the award amounts range anywhere between $1,220 per year to as high as $12,938 per year. They have a full-time tuition aid grant program. They have a part-time tuition aid grant program if you're attending a community college. They have a program called EOF, which stands for Educational Opportunity Fund. The two NJCLASS programs that you see here, which are the ones that if you graduate top 15% of your high school graduating class, you can go to community college tuition free for 2.5 years. And if you graduate with a certain GPA, you can then transfer to any four-year school in New Jersey under the STARS 2 program. There's a Governor's Urban Scholarship, New Jersey Gives for women and minorities, and the Community College Opportunity Grant. Now, the reason I didn't go into a lot of detail with each of these programs is not only, for the sake of time, but also because I have separate slides that describe each program and their eligibility criteria after this. So each one of the programs that you see here under award type on the left, you have a more detailed description on the following slide. So you see their description for the tuition aid grant program and the part-time TAG program. You see a description there for the Educational Opportunity Fund need-based grant. You see the Governor's Urban Scholarship. This is both a need and a merit-based scholarship. The NJCLASS Merit Scholarship, and you see the different criteria there for that program, and then for the NJCLASS 2 merit-based scholarship. Finally, the state scholarships under the Governor's Industry Vocational Scholarships for women and minorities. And then the Community College Opportunity Grant, the CCOG need-based grant. So again, the presentation is not only recorded where you can go over each one of these in more detail and go back, or if you request a copy of the presentation from your guidance office, you will be able to have this information handy in order to be able to refer back to it. So again, these are all things that when you automatically apply, you're going to be automatically evaluated for them. Student loans. Now, usually the question I get from parents during this time, if we were doing this presentation live, is a lot of parents are like, well, look, I don't think I'm going to qualify for any grants. So why do I need to complete a financial aid form? Well, here's the first reason, okay? Student loans have no income limit in terms of eligibility. So there are student loans. These are called federal undergraduate direct loans. And these are loans that are in the student's name only. And there is no credit check for these loans. So by completing a FAFSA, regardless of income, the student will automatically qualify for these loans. And again, there is no credit check for these loans, okay? And repayment on these loans begins 6 months after the student graduates, okay? So if you're considering finances, if you're considering cash flow for the household, if you're considering how are you going to piece different types of aid together, this is a very viable option for students and their families in order to be able to afford college. Okay, The only downside with these student loans, besides the fact that it is a loan, is that the loan amounts are not very large. Okay, so as you see here from the box, you see here grade level, and you'll see freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors, and beyond. You'll notice that the freshman amount is $5,500 for a dependent student. So the FAFSA is going to ask students certain questions, and how the student answers those questions is going to determine whether they're qualified as a dependent, which means they have to provide parental data on the FAFSA, or they are an independent student, which means just their income information is going to go on the FAFSA. Okay, most students, for the most part, fall under the dependent category. So you'll see here that we have different loan amounts. Freshmen can borrow up to $5,500. Sophomore can borrow up to $6,500. Juniors and seniors and beyond up to $7,500 per year. And then you notice here that there is an additional box that says max $3,500 subsidized. Okay. So what happens with these loans, again, besides, they're in the student's name, no credit check, repayment doesn't begin until 6 months after the student graduates, is there's one that's called a subsidized loan and one that's called an unsubsidized loan. The difference is the principal is deferred on both, but on the subsidized loan, the government pays for the interest while that student is in school. So this 2.75% interest that you see up here on the subsidized portion, that is being paid by the federal government while the student is in school. For the unsubsidized portion, which in the case of a freshman student would be a $2,000 difference here, that the student needs to decide whether they're going to make payment for the interest while they're in school, or they're going to have that interest capitalized while they're in school. So it's simple interest, not a large amount. Then you can make quarterly payments on it. I usually recommend that the student make quarterly payments on the interest. Loan amounts aren't very huge, because if you capitalize the interest, then at the end of the 6 months after they graduate, they're going to be paying interest on top of interest. So that would be my recommendation. And again, you see from the loan amounts, these aren't very big amounts. So this is just meant as an additional source of financial aid that is available to the student to qualify for. So again, if there was one reason to fill out the FAFSA, I would say this is reason number one. Additional loans. Now, these are loans that the student and the parent can borrow on, but now the criteria for borrowing gets a little stricter. So these are all credit-based loans, okay? So the first loan program that I point out is the parent and or student program that they can borrow is the New Jersey State NJCLASS Supplemental Loan Program. Okay, this is through the state of New Jersey. It is a credit-based loan. It's a loan that the student or the parent can borrow. The reason me personally, I like this loan is because they have a lot of different interest rates and repayment options. Okay, so for example, there's a 10-year fixed rate loan program. You can, when the student borrows, they can choose a 10-year repayment option. There's another one that's a 15-year repayment option or a 20-year repayment option. And you'll see that as the repayment options get lengthier, the interest rate goes up. Okay. There are some that are immediate repayment. So, if you chose one of those options, you could choose an immediate repayment option. You can choose an interest-only repayment option while the student is in school, or you can choose the option that is a full deferral while the student is in school. So you see a lot of options there, not only in terms of length of repayment and how to, minimize that, the monthly payment depending on how long or how far out you want to make those loan payments, but there's also those that are either immediate repayment, interest-only repayment, and full deferral. And again, depending on the one that you choose, the interest rate will be higher. This is administered through the state of New Jersey. They're the same ones who provide this presentation for me. And I'm going to put all their contact information at the very end of this presentation. So you can always go out to their website and you can look at all these different options that are available to you and see which one kind of fits the gamut for your family. Now, like I mentioned before, this is a credit-based loan. So usually what ends up happening is that some parents say, well, I expect my son or daughter to borrow on this loan. The student goes out and applies, and since it is credit-based, they do not have strong enough credit for the loan or have no credit, and therefore they get denied. The student can then choose to have either a parent or a guardian or a relative be a co-signer. So again, a very personal choice. In some cases, the parent just wants to borrow outright on behalf of the student. And in some cases, the parent would rather that the student borrow, and then they're the co-signer so that the loan debt is primarily on them. The next one is parent only can borrow, and that one is called the Federal Plus Loan Program. That stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. And again, for all these loan programs, you need the FAFSA. So again, another reason why, even if you are thinking of borrowing to pay for your sons and daughters' college education, you need to fill out that FAFSA in order to take advantage of these state and federal loan programs. So again, on the second one, the parent can only borrow. It's called the Federal Plus Loan Program. On that loan, again, the name says it there, only the parent can borrow. The student is not involved in that. Repayment begins immediately. Therefore, when the parent takes out that loan, once the first disbursement amount arrives at the college to pay for their semester term bill, then repayment on that amount will begin. Families have up to 25 years to repay back that loan. So it is an available option. They also have 10-year repayment options if you wanted to go that route. And currently the interest rate is at 5.3%. Okay, but again, it is a credit-based loan in the parent's name only. It is a federal loan program, and repayment begins immediately. Third option that you see there is, again, where the student or the parent can borrow. And these are private educational loans through private entities. Sallie Mae, Wells Fargo, PNC, TD Bank. And these could vary the gamut in terms of interest rates and repayments. Again, they are credit-based loans, so those will be dependent on the student or the parent's credit score. Current rates are subject to change. And usually what I say here is if you're looking at student loans as your options, you know that you can go to the state of New Jersey site and look at those options. You can go to the federal government's site and, type in plus on your on Google and see those options. But if you have a relationship with a bank, I would highly recommend look into, their student loan options. You may find that, perhaps they're as competitive or not more competitive than what the federal or state government is offering in terms of their interest rates, repayments, or, credit scores to borrow on these loans. So, definitely do not, discount them in terms of an option. And also, one final note is on these three types of loans, you can borrow up to the full yearly cost of college attendance, after other areas apply. And obviously, since they're credit basis, if your credit can handle it. So if it costs $30,000 for your son and daughter to go to that school per year, and you're not receiving any other type of aid, or, you can't make, payments or whatever, you can borrow up to the $30,000 per year in order to finance their education. Okay, again, you have to make wise decisions there, but at least you know that option is available to you. Institutional and private scholarships, merit or talent based. So this is probably an area where this is indirectly tied to financial aid. Okay. What do I mean by that? In other words, you don't need to file a FAFSA or apply for financial aid to be considered for a merit or a talent-based scholarship at the institution. Usually, these decisions are made during the student's admissions application review. All right, so student completes the Common App. That information is sent to each college or university. College or university is evaluating them for admissions at that school, but at the same time, these are some of the factors that they may be looking at, not only for admissibility at that school, but also to determine whether the student will be given any college-based merit aid or university-based merit aid or talent-based aid. Okay, so again, it's probably the area where you have the greatest flexibility. Each college is going to make that determination differently, Most of them will not share, how they weigh these factors in their admissions application review or in their merit-based, or talent-based, determinations. So, but again, it's married to financial aid. Okay, and what do I mean by that? So when the admissions offices make their decisions about admissibility, admit your son and daughter, and at the same time make their determinations as to any merit-based or institutional-based talent-based need. After they do those decisions, they send that information to the financial aid office. Then the financial aid offices have their own need-based determinations. Okay, so and I'll give you the example at TC&J. So at TC&J, we have different income guidelines depending on the household size and information that's reported on the FAFSA, where we may say, well, we consider a family that makes X amount of income a needy family. Okay, and that's our determination. We may say, well, we consider a family that makes $100,000 a year in household income a needy family. Okay, another institution may say, well, we consider a family that makes under $150,000 a year a needy family. So that varies by institution, just like these factors for institutional funding vary per institution. That need-based funding will vary by institution. Okay, so once the merit-based, they send it to financial aid. We have our own need-based determination based on the FAFSA results or the profile, which I'll cover in a little bit. And then what would happen is we would determine if a student has a FAFSA on file and we consider them to be a needy student, whatever merit aid is given by the admissions office, by the institution, we would supplement it with need-based aid. So let's say our admissions office determined that a student qualifies for a $7,000 merit-based scholarship for the $7,000 per year for every year that they were here for the 4 years. That's 7,777. And we determined that they were also eligible for need-based aid based on the FAFSA results. And that need-based aid put them in a $3,000 per year eligibility range. So what we would do is we would supplement the 7,000 merit with 3,000 in need-based aid. So then the student would receive a total of $10,000 per year in institutional merit and need-based aid. So it's married together. If a student does not complete a FAFSA, then what would happen is when admissions sends us those students that are receiving some type of merit-based aid, we would look in our records, we would see that there's no FAFSA on file, and we would move on because we have no way of determining if that student had need because they have not completed a FAFSA. Okay, so again, kind of like the most flexibility in terms of institutional aid for the merit side, but then once it's sent to the financial aid office, that's where we come in. That's why we put it as part of this presentation, and then we would determine if the family based on the institutional criteria was considered needy, and if we were going to have to supplement those funds for the 4 years that they were here. Okay. Applications. So I'm going to go over 3 applications. 2 are probably the ones that everybody completes, and then a third one for undocumented students only. But that doesn't mean that perhaps each individual institution may have their own institutional form. Okay. So what I mean by this is you really need to have your sons and daughters check each college's website to see if they require the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, or if they require the FAFSA and the CSS profile, okay? Or perhaps just the CSS profile, or perhaps there's an institutional form on top of one of these, so there might be a combination, it might be one. So your sons and daughters should be checking each institution's site to see what is required to apply for aid. I could probably tell you that probably over 90% of the institutions nationally will require the FAFSA through studentaid.gov. So let's get into those forms. So the first one I'm going to go over is called the CSS profile, College Scholarship Service Profile. It is through the College Board. You see what their website looks like there. The CSS profile is basically a FAFSA on steroids, as I would call it. Okay, so nearly 400 colleges and organizations use the profile to determine how they will award institutional funds. The profile is available on October 1st of each year, and it collects more comprehensive income, asset, and household information than the FAFSA. So, for example, if you complete the FAFSA does not require you to put in any information about your primary home. You may have a home that's worth $500,000 and you only owe $50,000 on that mortgage. Therefore, you have a $450,000 equity. The FAFSA asks no information about your primary home. The profile may ask information about your primary home because perhaps that institution may require that you borrow a certain amount from your home equity in order to finance your sons and daughters' education before they give you any institutional funding. The profile may ask for information about your retirement value. Okay, they want to ask how much you may have in your 401k or your Roth IRA or anything like that. All right, the FAFSA is not concerned with your retirement, whether you have a pension, retirement account, anything, 401k, anything like that. Again, profile school may ask that either you borrow, on your retirement, or perhaps they're looking at how much are you contributing per year on that retirement account. And they may say, well, you really don't need to be contributing the maximum. Perhaps you need to pull back and some of that money should go to pay for your sons and daughters' college education before we give you any institutional funds. The FAFSA only collects information in terms of, let's say we have divorced families or separated families. The FAFSA only collects the information about the custodial parent. FAFSA does not care about the finances of the non-custodial parent. But again, a profile school may require that you fill out the non-custodial application because they want to know, ex-husband, how much they make, the stepfather, whatever, information like that. So again, you want to have your sons and daughters check what application the school requires, and if it requires the profile, just understand that it is more comprehensive and more household information is going to be requested. The profile does align with the FAFSA's use of what's called prior year income or 2019 income for the 21-22 academic year. So the FAFSA and the profile are using basically income information that is 2 years old. Information that should have been filed already, information that you have access to already. So keep that in mind. And I'm going to go over towards the very end of the presentation what happens if your income situation has changed since then. Also, the profile costs money. The profile costs $25 to file, and that allows you one college, and then each additional college costs $16. The FAFSA is free. You can put as many colleges as possible, and the FAFSA is free. I've given you here the website to apply for the profile, the website to apply for the non-custodial profile if your school requires it, the customer service number, their help email, and they also have a live chat option available if you need to get in touch with them. I can tell you that in New Jersey, Stevens Institute of Technology is the only school that requires the profile. So this is more of if your sons and daughters are thinking of applying to out-of-state schools, you really should be diligent with checking to make sure that the profile is not required. This one only applies to a certain few students, but we still mention it. New Jersey does have an alternative financial aid application for undocumented students. In order to apply for federal financial aid or even the CSS profile, students must be either U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. In other words, they need to be here under a permanent status. But New Jersey does provide assistance for undocumented students. They have their own separate application. It's through their website. They require certain criteria in order for you to, meet eligibility, even, as an undocumented student for state aid. You have here kind of like a screenshot of the types of aid that are available, state aid that are available to undocumented student and their criteria. So again, if this applies to you, you can always, refer to it, spend more time, and contact the state of New Jersey in terms of eligibility requirements. And like I said before, I will give you all the information about the state of New Jersey and their contact information towards the end of this presentation. So the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the application that almost everybody will complete. Okay, so again, you need to check with your individual schools to see if they require the FAFSA and the profile, or the FAFSA in another form, or the profile in another form, or whatever. So in other words, you could have more than one application, being requested by each school. So that's why you definitely need to check that information. Okay, but the FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It is also available October 1 of 2020. So the next 2 weeks, it will be available for you to begin to complete it. The FAFSA also uses what's called prior year income information. So again, for those seniors who are listening to this presentation, this is the FAFSA that you will complete for the 21-22 academic year, which starts next September. Any underclassmen, that are listening to this presentation, this is a very good primer for you, but you are not ready to apply yet. Your FAFSA has not come out yet. Okay, this is basically for the seniors who are listening to this presentation. The FAFSA gives you the option of using what's called the IRS data retrieval tool, which is once you are on the FAFSA, you can automatically link to the IRS website, and it will bring in all the information automatically. There's certain filers who cannot use the retrieval, and you see that that hash there, but it is the method that we recommend highly. It is error-free. Brings all the data over, as opposed to you having to read your FAFSA and look line by line, and perhaps make a mistake in terms of your adjusted gross income or taxes paid or things like that. So we definitely recommend the using of the data retrieval tool. And you can apply and submit the FAFSA prior to your earliest school deadline. So what we mean here is we recommend that students go out and look at the colleges and universities that they're thinking of attending and look at the deadline dates for financial aid application. And whatever the earliest school deadline is, then fill out the FAFSA by that deadline date. This will assure that every other school that you are applying to will have the FAFSA available to them in order to determine your financial aid eligibility. Now, the FAFSA, let me go back here a second, I apologize. The FAFSA, you do not have to have your common application completed or have even applied to a school in order to complete the FAFSA and put that school on the FAFSA, okay? What do I mean by that? So in other words, the FAFSA allows you to put up to 10 colleges per submission. So you can fill out the FAFSA, you can put 10 colleges on your first submission and submit that FAFSA, and those 10 colleges will have access to your FAFSA data. The colleges are not going to do anything with that FAFSA data until you apply and you are admitted to that school, okay? If you have a dream college that you're thinking of applying to but you haven't applied yet, put them on the FAFSA. It does not hurt for that school to have access to your FAFSA data if you apply. If you never apply, they'll have access, but they will never use that access because, as you will see in Section 3, there's a lot of work involved in preparing an aid package, and they're only going to prepare an aid package if you're admitted to that school. All right? Also, once you submit your FAFSA with the initial 10 colleges, at any point, if you apply to any other schools or you want to add more schools, you can go back into the federal government's website to your saved FAFSA. You can delete any of the colleges that you've already placed, put new colleges, and resubmit the FAFSA. Within 72 hours, new colleges that you've indicated on the FAFSA will now have access to this data, and the previous 10 colleges will never lose access. Okay? So again, you don't need to have your admissions applications for the schools completed in order to complete the FAFSA and put that college on the FAFSA. All right, so that should not stop you, in other words, from applying for financial aid. And the Common App has been available since August 1st, so hopefully some of you have already begun or started looking at the Common App. So the FAFSA, what does the FAFSA do? So the FAFSA collects the family's personal and financial information, which is then used to calculate the student's expected family contribution. And you will see that phrase again. You do the FAFSA electronically. You've got their website there, studentaid.gov. An important factor is, since this is done electronically, the student and at least one parent must create a federal student ID or FSA ID at fsa.ed.gov. You can do the FAFSA via your smartphone through the My Student Aid app. So it is very technology friendly in terms of you can use an iPad, you can use a smartphone, you can use a desktop, whatever modality you use, you can complete the FAFSA via that mechanism. Also, in regards to the Student Aid ID, back in the old days when you actually had to do a paper FAFSA, you would, physically sign it and mail it in. The Student Aid ID is basically your electronic signature. So like I said, the student is the applicant. So the student is the one completing the FAFSA, but in some cases it requires that they fill it out with parental data. So the student and at least one parent must create an FSA ID and use that to submit the FAFSA. I've given you some information about how to create an FSA ID because it can be a bit of a daunting process sometimes. Sometimes the FAFSA is easier to complete than creating the FSA ID. And obviously the easiest mechanism is just to go out to YouTube, and you have a link there, YouTube, on how to create an FSA ID right from the federal government's financial aid site. And plus you also have some really good links that you see there on the right for, things like managing student loans or how to complete a FAFSA. So it's, very useful tools that are available to you for free out on the web. Some general eligibility requirements for the FAFSA. So remember, the FAFSA is being completed by the student. So these are eligibility requirements for the student. So the student must have a valid Social Security number. The student must be enrolled or accepted for enrollment in an eligible program and pursuing a degree. In other words, the student is in college for a reason. They're not there as a non-matriculated student trying to figure out life. They're there for a purpose: accounting, engineering, teaching, whatever. The student must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. And again, this is the student. They're the ones who are applying. And males must be registered with the Selective Service System. Most males in the U.S. at the age of 18 must register with Selective Service. If you're applying for a federal benefit, the federal government requires that men register for the Selective Service. Females do not. Any 17-year-old seniors at the time you fill out the FAFSA, you can indicate on the FAFSA to please register you when you turn 18, and FAFSA will automatically do that for you. Just some key components of the FAFSA, student demographic information, and you're going to find the FAFSA does have a lot of questions, but once you start breaking down the FAFSA and the different sections of the FAFSA, you're going to find that most of the questions are like this, your name, your Social Security, your date of birth, if you have a driver's license, that information, your gender, your income and assets. There's going to be those questions that ask information about you to determine whether you're dependent or independent, filling it out with just your information or your parents' information. And for those students who, get stumbled on these questions, I always recommend at that point reaching out to the guidance department, and they can kind of assist you, in terms of how best to answer the questions and what the proper scenario is for you. For dependent students, parent information is going to be requested, on the FAFSA. Things like household size are asked, number in college, parent income and assets. If anybody in the household is on a federal means tested benefit like SNAP or SSI or reduced lunch, things like that. These are all components of the FAFSA formula to determine eligibility. So these are all very, very, very important questions that need to be asked and answered. Like I mentioned before, you're going to list all your colleges of interest. Again, whether you've applied or not, or whether you're thinking of going, it's just if you're interested in those schools, put them on the FAFSA and allow them to have access to your data if you apply. And again, you can do up to 10 on your first submission. And then if you need to add more, you can go back to your Save FAFSA and add more. And then once submitted, the state of New Jersey may ask you for additional questions, but we're going to cover that in the next section. So what you have here is the FAFSA submission page. So when you complete that FAFSA, you're going to see this on your screen. I recommend, even though you're going to get it via email, all this information is going to be sent to the student's email that they used on the FAFSA. I always recommend that everybody you just print this page and have it for your records. You should be, have a folder created with a lot of this information, whether it's admissions or financial information for you to have. You're going to notice that, it will tell you kind of like what happens next on the application up here. You have here the estimated expected family contribution. It's going to tell you whether, you're eligible for a Pell Grant and how much, whether, a Stafford loan, those direct Stafford loans that we were talking about before, subsidized and unsubsidized, if you're eligible for how much. So again, it just has some good summary information for you. I would say printed. And the reason also I say printed is because it's going to have a confirmation number of when you completed that FAFSA, the day and the time, and something called a data release number. So if God forbid, you put the wrong code for a school, or, a college can't access your data, you can always give the college this information and they can access the data, from you, even if they weren't listed as a college of choice on your first application. So additional documents, if additional documents are requested from you, what's going to happen is the institution that's receiving the data is going to act on behalf of the federal government. So if the federal government needs any more information from you to determine eligibility, the institution will reach out to the student and ask for that data. And I've kind of given you a sample of what our, outreach letter looks like, from TCNJ, what we would require from you would be listed here. So, each college or university, if the federal government or if they need information from you, they're going to reach out to you individually. Now, if the state of New Jersey needs information, because remember, going back to one of those very, very first slides, information is going to the federal government, the state, and also each school. If the state of New Jersey needs more information from you, they will also reach out to you, and they will reach out to you via email. So I've given you some screenshots here just in case you get an email from the state of New Jersey and you're unsure, well, is this legit? Is this spam? If the emails look something like this, it is not spam. It means the state of New Jersey is requesting more data from you. And they may ask you to set up a profile through their website so that you can upload information to them. If they request more info from you, you can receive it through kind of like your own student portal with the state of New Jersey. So I've kind of given you some screenshots here of what their website, what the notifications would look like, what their website looks like to set up, your profile, and their system is called NJFAMS, New Jersey Financial Aid Management System. So again, it's just to let you know that, in case you're unsure of something or you think it's spam, it's good for you to be vigilant, but understand that schools, the federal government, and the state, at some point may reach out to you if they need more data from you. So section 3, the aid package, okay, and this is probably the section where I want to try and spend a little bit of time because it's probably the area that's going to cause the most angst potentially. So the aid package. So there's various things that happen in order for a institution to create a financial aid award from you or an aid package and send it to you. Okay. So again, when you completed your FAFSA, you indicated on the FAFSA the colleges that you would like the information released to. Once you apply to those schools and you've been admitted at each one of those schools, then each one of those schools is going to go out to the federal government site, or if you're a CSS profile school, they're going to go out to the College Board and they're going to retrieve all of that financial information that you completed. They're going to use that information then to create a financial aid package for you or an award, okay, a financial aid award for the year. All right. So the first thing that the colleges do is they look at how much does it cost to go to that school. Okay, they develop a budget for you, a yearly budget. Remember, you're applying for financial aid every year. Okay, so every year they will develop what's called a cost of attendance. How much does it cost for you to go to that school? And what are the factors involved? They're going to look at tuition and fees, room and board, books, supplies, equipment, transportation to and from the school, miscellaneous expenses, loan fees if you're going to be studying abroad. Let's say it's your junior year and you're doing that. How much does the study abroad program cost? If you're taking out health insurance through the school because your parents, don't have it, how much that costs. So they look at all these factors and they establish what's called a cost of attendance. How much does it cost to go to that school every year? Okay, so that's number one. Number two is they look at that expected family contribution from the FAFSA or from the profile. Okay, so the profile and the FAFSA spit out their results. And then they're going to look at those results, and based on those results, that EFC, that's the basis of the aid package. The EFC is determined by a federal formula that calculates need using that information you supplied on the FAFSA. And the EFC and financial need are the guidelines used by schools to determine an aid package. Okay, so we have the first criteria is establishing that cost of attendance. Then they look at the results of the application for financial aid. So I'm going to give you a sample EFC for the Smith family. So this family lives in New Jersey. Both parents are married. Household size is 4, mom, dad, 2 children with 1 child going to college. Their 2018 adjusted gross income was $120,000 a year. Their assets were $20,000, and the student had no income and no assets. So in this situation, the federal government determined that this family could contribute $20,830 per year towards their child's cost of attendance at the college. Okay? Now, I know that sounds like a lot, especially on a household of 4 with 1 child going to college with that adjusted gross income, but this is kind of like where that disconnect, between a lot of people say within the federal formula and reality comes into play. The federal formula is very strict, in terms of how it calculates allowances for housing, allowances, for transportation, health insurance, things like that. So, you're going to find that probably most of the time the family contribution or that EFC is higher than what you think, it should be. And that's why you need to spend time with the financial aid office and kind of plan how are you going to meet the cost of education for your son and daughter at that school. So again, we have the sample EFC. So then we have here kind of like the financial need for that same family. Okay. So the first thing that we look at is the type of college or university that your sons and daughters are going to attend. Okay. So we have community college, state college or university, private college or university. Okay. And you see that each one of those has a different COA or cost of attendance. Remember that budget that was in that first slide, tuition, fees, room, board, things like that. So we see that at a community colleges are relatively inexpensive. There's no dorms, there's no meal plans, things like that. So community college, we have an average of $5,860 a year, let's say for New Jersey. State college and university in New Jersey, again, here, we are including in that cost of attendance, tuition, fees, room, and board. So you see that, now the price increases a little bit more because, there's a room and board component and perhaps, books and transportation and things like that. And then we see private college, university, then we know that that's a little bit more expensive. They're not, as private colleges do not receive, funding from the state of New Jersey. So although they are more expensive, usually private colleges recognize this and they realize that we need to be a little bit more generous with our institutional scholarship funding in order to make it affordable or more affordable for families to attend here. Then there's that constant factor, that EFC, estimated family contribution, expected family contribution. And you see that's the constant. You see that those are from the results of the FAFSA. And no matter where you're attending, whether it's here in New Jersey or no matter what institution you're attending or whether it's nationally or whatever, that will always remain the same, $20,830, what you can contribute per year. And then from there, we establish what's called financial need. All right. So obviously, you see that if we were to look at a community college, the Smith family, their contribution towards education is more than what a community college costs. So therefore, the Smith family has no financial need at the community college. So the community college has no responsibility to package that student with financial aid because they have no need. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that if the student qualified for institutional merit-based funding, again, merit-based funding or private scholarship, that they would not award that student. They would absolutely give that student those scholarships. It's just that in terms of a need component, the college has no responsibility to find any financial aid for that student. Okay? I hope I'm making sense there. It's a little tough when you're doing this recorded because I have no feedback or interaction from you as an audience. State college or university, a little different. Obviously, you see the cost there is $25,561. The family can contribute $20,830 for the year. So that's family's financial need is $4,731. So really, the financial aid office in this situation is trying to find enough financial aid to cover the $4,731. Okay. So again, if we were to remember back to those student loans that we were looking at, so if a student was packaged in this case with a $5,000 loan, then the college has met its responsibility. They have found, enough financial aid to cover the financial need for this student. Okay. Also, this means that if, let's say, the student received a $10,000 merit-based scholarship from the institution, then the student would receive it. We would include that as part of the student's aid package. But then that means that not only has the financial need been met, but then also some of the parent contribution has been met, which that's a great scenario. Okay. Usually what we find is we can meet that financial need of the $4,731, but then the parent comes to us and says, I have to tell you, it is impossible for us to pay that $20,830 that the federal government is expecting us to pay. And then that would mean an appointment with the school's financial aid office to talk to them about your finances, to see what other options, if any, or what other loan options perhaps are available to your family to help with that $20,830 that the federal government says you should be contributing. And then finally, the private college university, again, we see that the cost there is $45,676. That family contribution is $20,830. So therefore, the financial need is a little higher. It's at $24,846. So again, the private college university is trying to find enough financial aid to be able to cover that $24,846,000 need. Okay. So again, these are all of the components of a financial aid package: the cost of attendance, how much does it cost to go there for the year, the family contribution based on the results of the FAFSA, and then that financial need based on the cost at each school minus the family contribution from the FAFSA. So after all that is done, then the colleges turn around, and colleges, universities, and they send you what's called an award notice. Okay. So this is, again, where it can be very confusing, very overwhelming, because the award notices may vary in format by institution. One institution may send you a hard copy form, with, here's the Northern New Mexico College example that I have for you, which, has pertinent data on it. Another one may say, well, we do not send out financial aid packages, financial aid packets to your home in hard copy. We will send you an email notification to log into your school's portal, and you can view your financial aid through that mechanism. Okay. It is available after the FAFSA is filed and the student is accepted. So again, we go back to, you could put 10 colleges, on the FAFSA. You apply to all 10, only 5 of you accept you. Only 5 of them accept you, so therefore you're only going to receive 5 financial aid notices, award notices from the 5 colleges that you were accepted. You see, because there's a lot of work involved in creating those award notices. And obviously, it is used to compare aid packages. Okay, so where also some of the uncertainty comes into play is that the formats may vary by institution. So northern New Mexico, you see kind of like very nice format. A lot of colleges may use this format, but other colleges may just say, "Hey, look, this is what we're giving you. It is up to you to find out how much it costs to come here per year. If you have enough, to meet your expenses here." Some colleges may say, "Well, we're going to package you with institutional scholarships, but we're going to give you $40,000, let's say, in an institutional scholarship." And then one college may say, "We're going to take that $40,000 and divide it equally for 4 years. $10,000 for freshman year, $10,000 sophomore, $10,000 junior, $10,000 senior." Great. You can kind of plan things out for the 4 years. You know what you're getting, and then you can build, your aid package from there. But another college may go, "Well, we're going to give you 40, but we're going to front load it. We're going to give you 20,000 your freshman year, 15 your sophomore year, and then 5 and 5 junior and senior." So you need to just look out for those nuances, the conditions, on the aid that you're receiving, and the scholarships that you're receiving, because you may get an aid package that looks really good compared to another one, but then one school may be front loading you while the other school is not. You see, one school may be including student loans as part of their aid package, while another school is not. So again, take time in reading these award notices and comparing them, school by school, because they could vary tremendously, not only in how they package their aid, but also the format that they're sending you that aid in. Now, a couple of years ago, the federal government recognized that getting these award notices in so many different formats was creating a lot of anxiety for families. So what they did was they tried to standardize their award notices. And they created what's called the College Financing Plan. It used to be referred to as the shopping sheet. Okay, standardize the award notices so you could see, things like, what was the expected contribution from the FAFSA? How much was it going to cost to go there? How much were you receiving in scholarships? How much are you receiving in grants, loan options? So it broke it out really, really nicely. I like the College Financing Plan because it allows you to compare apples to apples. If you get this from College A and you get this from College B, you were comparing apples to apples. You weren't comparing this document with this one. You see, so you see the vast differences there. Okay. What happened was, where they fell a little short, was they made it voluntary. So not all colleges use this College Financing Plan. Okay. So you may find that one college gives you this format for your award notice, while another one gives you this format for your award notice. Now, New Jersey recognized that difference and that the College Financing Plan was voluntary. So what they did in New Jersey was they said, well, we would like all New Jersey colleges to use the standard plan. And it's, like I said, it's called either the shopping sheet or it's called the College Financing Plan, but it's the same format, the same way, the same information is provided. So in the state of New Jersey, there is a law that says that all students must receive their award notices via a College Financing Plan or shopping sheet. The college may also present this one, but they at least must use this one. So at least when comparing New Jersey schools, you will be able to compare apples to apples in terms of your financial aid awards. Okay. Again, this is, besides applying for admissions, besides filling out the financial aid forms and doing everything that's required of you, this is probably the area that's going to cause you the most anxiety, because this is where, kind of like what I say, the rubber hits the road, when you are really comparing the cost to attend one school versus the cost to attend the other, and how much one institution is granting you in aid and how much the other one is granting you in aid, and where you have to make your decisions as to whether College C, your third choice, is giving you a better package than College A, your first choice. And students need to sit down with mom and dad, discuss this frankly, and go, can we afford to send our son and daughter to College A when College C is giving us a better aid option? Okay. And again, what I always recommend is if you have any questions, reach out to the financial aid office that's sending you the award notice. If you get stuck with any area, if you're unsure of the conditions, if you don't understand them, that way when you make your decision, you are making an informed decision about the amounts and the type of aid that you're receiving at that school. So section 4, other information. So, some of this is going to be real common sense, but we still mention it. Again, you're going to have this presentation either in a hard copy if you desire it, or you'll be able to go back on this recording. So, but my, first advice is be proactive. Review those deadlines. See which college has the first deadline. Complete the FAFSA. Create an Excel spreadsheet, perhaps, of all the different schools with their admissions deadlines and their financial aid deadlines. If you're unsure about something, call them up. If you see, friends are receiving, their admissions notices and you're not, be proactive. Call them up. Is the school requesting more information from you and you just didn't know it, or they sent it to an email address that you no longer have functional, or it's going to spam. So be proactive when it comes to all these processes. Again, October through February is when the bulk of all this is happening, from the deadlines to completing applications and things like that. February through May is when the schools are usually sending out their award letters. You could be also receiving your admissions decisions during that time, unless you're an early decision student, which, that happens much earlier. But usually this is the hot time when you're receiving those admissions decisions of where you got in. You're also receiving those award letters. And then May 1 is decision day. You need to make your decision by which school you're going to and pay your deposits. And then June through July is when you're registering and the schools are sending out those fall semester bills. So you want to make sure that during this time, you pretty much have most of your aid solidified. You've provided your data, and you've either begun or you've pretty much finalized your loan processes at this point. Special circumstances. So I kind of alluded to this at the very beginning. Remember, the FAFSA and the profile use what's called prior year income, or for the current seniors that will start college next September of 21. It's using 2019 income information. And we know a lot of things could happen since 2019. If you would have told me right now we'd be in the middle of a pandemic, I wouldn't have believed you a year ago. But things do happen. And financial aid offices recognize that. So most financial aid offices have what are called special circumstances. It's pretty much allows the financial aid office to remove the 2019 income that's used on the FAFSA, or base year income that's used on the FAFSA, and replace it with projected year income if the family is meeting one of these conditions. And what I've given you here is you pretty much have kind of like the 7 standard conditions that most colleges or universities look at, but this varies by institution. So some institution may have more conditions that they consider acceptable than others. So I could tell you these are the 7 conditions that TCNJ considers acceptable. I think we have maybe 1 or 2 more that are not on here. But for example, you may have another institution that if you are paying for private school tuition, let's say for your son and daughter who's going to high school or grade school or whatever, some colleges will consider that a special condition or special circumstance and be able to take that into account in their calculation of eligibility. If you pay, unusual medical or dental expenses, that might be another one. So there are conditions that are not listed here that vary by institution. But again, the only thing you need to know is that these special circumstances options exist. If you feel that you have a special circumstance, go out and visit the school's website and see if you can find their special circumstances page. Ours is pretty prominent, but some schools are a little harder to find, and then see what acceptable conditions are for a reevaluation of the aid package at that school. Other resources, and the main thing I want to put out here is have a 4-year plan. When we are packaging students, you apply for financial aid every year. So every year you fill out a new FAFSA. Every year circumstances may change, but traditionally from one year to the other, you usually the income does not change very much for the majority of households. So as you are determining whether that first year you can afford to send your sons and daughters there, whether can afford to pay for college, understand that you are thinking for 4 years now. Is that if you can't afford to send your son and daughter that freshman year, how are you going to afford sophomore, junior, and senior year? Or if you're kind of stretching yourself thin that freshman year, how are you going to afford sophomore, junior, and senior year? So again, this is a 4-year plan, but you have some options here. Make sure that you've looked at outside scholarship opportunities. And on the next slide, I have some links for you there. Payment plans are another option, to help defray some of that cost and spread it out, over a 10-month or 12-year option. Campus employment, you're being evaluated when you complete the FAFSA 4 work study. Take advantage of those opportunities. Work study, the way it works is you basically receive a work study allocation, like let's say $2,000 for the year, and then you earn that $2,000 by working on campus. You see, so again, you're looking for as many sources of aid as you possibly may be eligible for to meet that cost of attendance. Specialized campus opportunities, like for example, a very popular one is residential advisor. So any of you listening that have attended college before, parents in particular, you lived on campus, you may remember that most dorms hire residential advisors. Basically, they manage a floor or several floors and keep the peace, let's say. Residential advisor positions usually have to be an upperclassman in good standing, good GPA, but provides free housing for students, and in some cases a stipend towards their meal plan. So, to be able to, acquire one of those positions, you could be looking at significant savings every year on your cost of attendance, because you could say, well, I've already, I'm getting free housing and part of my meals or all of my meals are being covered for. So that's a huge chunk that I don't have to, worry about getting aid for or borrowing or whatever. So some other opportunities, again, I mentioned here, student ambassadors, student tour guides, internships, co-ops, things like that. Never too late to begin your private scholarship search. For those seniors who are listening to this, now is prime time. Go to the institutions that you are applying to and go through their websites and see if they have private scholarship links that you can apply for. For example, if you went to the TCNJ site and you went to my private scholarship link, I probably have about 17 pages of different scholarships, some with 2 and 3, per page that you may be eligible to apply for. Do not be afraid to, if you, let's say, are, a Knights of Columbus or in the Rotary Club or a Boy Scout or whatever, to reach out to those entities and ask, do they have private scholarships that you can apply for? Your church, your synagogue, your temple, parents' employer, go to the HR offices and ask, do they have scholarships, for eligible dependents of employees there. You have some very reputable sites there for private scholarship searches that I put there that, I can assure you are not data mining or anything like that. FAFSAdays.org, it's a site through the state of New Jersey that provides FAFSA completion information. So if you get stuck, completing your FAFSA, you have, YouTube videos and 8 steps for completing the FAFSA, how to create the FSA ID. Pre-COVID, they used to have FAFSA completion workshops by county, but unfortunately, due to the pandemic, that's probably not going to happen this year. But again, it's just another resource that's available to you if you get stuck, besides, your school or the guidance office. The state of New Jersey is the one who prepares this presentation. For us, we come out and do these presentations on behalf of the state. So, they're a treasure trove of information that is available to help you in planning for college and college cost calculators and things like that. So do not be afraid to take advantage of them. Also, you have given you the state of New Jersey's website with their contact information. So the New Jersey Higher Education Student Assistance Authority is the state entity, the New Jersey state entity for grants, scholarships, and loans. You are residents of New Jersey. You can reach out to them and call their customer care line, the 609 number or the 800 number you see there, Monday through Thursdays, 8 to 8 and Fridays, on any financial, question that you have that you're unsure of, that you can't get a hold of anybody. Call them up, and then at least they can, perhaps steer you towards the right direction and say you need to call the federal government for that. Here's their number. You need to call the school, for that. So again, it's just more resources that are available to you. And questions. Now, I know this is a recorded session, but I did have some questions sent to me beforehand from some of the Freehold Regional parents. So I figured I would take this time to answer those questions. So, all right, we have a 529 question. So 529 assets are not attached to a particular child. If you have more than one 529 account, will the total of these accounts be applied to each child applying for college? Okay, so great question on 529s. So 529s are considered an asset on the FAFSA. So when you are completing the FAFSA, you must list them on the FAFSA as an asset. Now, whoever holds that 529 is going to be important for FAFSA purposes. So for example, if the parent holds a 529, whether it's for the applicant who's completing the FAFSA or for multiple children that they have in their household, whether those children are ready to go to college or not, then the parents must list the entire 529 as their asset on the FAFSA. I know that sounds a little strange that you're like, well, am I getting penalized for having a 529 that's worth $150,000 when it's 50 for Johnny, 50 for Sue, and 50 for Alan? Unfortunately, yes, you have to put the whole entire, 150 on there. Now, if the 529 is in each child's name, then it would go in the student section, but then only the student's amount would go on the FAFSA. Okay, so the parent would not indicate it as their asset. The student would indicate it as his or her asset, and only their amount would go in there. If the 529 is listed, being held by the grandparent or whatever, then it does not get listed, as an asset for the parent or the student. Okay. So again, now the one positive there when it comes to a 529 is, at least if it's on the parent end, only 5.6% of that asset, of a parent asset, is looked at towards the FAFSA contribution. So what I mean by that, so let's say the parent had $100,000 asset, only $5,600 of that is going to be looked at towards their parents' contribution towards the educational expenses. So it's not a huge amount, or it makes a little bit more of a dent as if the asset is in the student's name, that on that end, 20% of the asset is going to be looked at towards their family contribution. And in terms of how you want to spend it, if you want to spend it all freshman year and then have nothing for sophomore, junior, or spread it out over 4 years, that's a very personal decision. And what I would recommend there is that you speak to the financial aid office and they can guide you better as to what the best option, because it's a very individual family by family option. Okay. Next question that came in has to do with divorced or separated parents, the situations there. So for children in divorced homes, which parent's financial information is used? So great question. So for divorced parents, the information that goes on the FAFSA is for the custodial parent. So, in terms of a divorced family, there's a divorce decree, and whoever is the custodial parent, that's whose information would go on the FAFSA. Now, if you have a custodial agreement where it's exactly 50-50 between the mother and the father, then the FAFSA information is for the parent who provides the most support for that year that the FAFSA data is for. So usually the default here is the parent who makes the most money, if it's truly a 50-50 custodial agreement, is whose information goes on the FAFSA. All right. Now, for separated parents but not yet divorced, again, it would go with then the child, the parent for who the child resides with the most. Okay. And again, if we get back to where the child is going 50-50, than the parent who provides the most support. Okay, so it's kind of the same as just on a divorce decree. It's a lot easier because it's kind of written, hopefully, in the divorce decree. Now, if you have the case of a divorced parent, but they've remarried. So let's say I am the student. I live with my mother. She is my custodial parent, but she has now remarried. In that situation, not only does my mother's income have to go on the FAFSA, but my stepfather's income also goes on the FAFSA. Okay? Even if that step parent has no responsibility, does not want to pay, does not want to contribute, the bottom line is the FAFSA requires that the step parent income go on the FAFSA because it's considered a resource coming into the house, and therefore it is, looked at in terms of eligibility. Okay, so those were kind of like the questions that I have in terms of divorced or separated parents. So this ends the recorded presentation. Again, hopefully it is helpful to you. I know it was a lot of information. Please refer back to the presentation. If you have additional questions, please reach out to the guidance office. They will try and get you an answer. And again, if they're not able to get you an answer, they will reach out to somebody like myself in the aid community to try and get you a proper answer. Okay? I wish you the best of luck, and thank you for listening in. Have a good night.